Welcome to this episode of Equalizer. I'm your host, William Acosta. Today I have the honor of presenting a retired DA Senior Special Agent, Mike Chavarria, a veteran of more than 3 decades, taking the fight directly to major drug trafficking organizations across Latin America, from the U.S. Mexican border to overseas postings in Bolivia, Costa Rica, Guadalajara, and Mexico City. Mike worked high-risk operations, debriefed cartel figures, and helped build cases that hit the cartels where it hurts the most. He also is the author of a book, Junior, a son of the Gulf Cartel, a real-life story of crime, loyalty, and redemption that follows the son of a powerful drug lord who makes the impossible decision to cooperate with the DEA and become a secret weapon against some of the most violent kingpins in this hemisphere. Good morning, Mike. Welcome to this episode of Equalizer. Thank you for taking your time, and thank you for sharing this splendid book with me, Junior, a son of the Gulf Cartel, which you author, and I recommend everyone to pick up a copy. Where can the people pick up a copy of your book?
At Amazon or anywhere they sell books. You can also go to my website, MikeChavarria.org.
Are you working in any other books at the present time?
Yes, sir. I have a book that I'm editing right now to be released later this year.
What is the name of that book, if we could know?
The title is still a work in progress.
Working stage.
Yeah, but it has to do with a Mexican comandante that spent 37 years dodging bullets, a grave, and navigating political corruption.
And hopefully in the near future, this book, Junior, will also be in Spanish, which is something that you guys are working on, and I hope that the Latino community gets to read this magnificent piece of work. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. What prompted your desire to join the DEA?
I was a kid who knew pretty much at a very young age what he was going to do. It was either going to be police work or join the military or both. And as it turned out, I did both.
You spent some time in the Navy, and your MOS was NCIC. You were a criminal investigator, or what type of work did you do in the Navy?
I joined the Navy to be a naval aviator, a pilot. So after college, I was recruited, passed the test to become a naval aviator, and then I went to Aviation Officer Candidate School in Pensacola, Florida, received my commission, and started flight school. Shortly into flight school, after starting to fly, I had a full complete physical. It was the second complete physical that I had from joining, and they found that my eyesight had diminished to a point where I was no longer qualified to actually fly the plane. So I was given the option to become a navigator, sit in the back seat, or go on a ship, or get out. And I chose to retain my naval commission, and I got out.
And where do you go from there?
Upon departing or being discharged from the active duty service of the Navy, I encountered Naval Investigative Service, which was today it's called NCIS. They suggested, because of my interest in law enforcement, that I apply for the job. I did. I was hired in 1984, and worked a year and a half with the Naval Investigative Service.
As a civilian, 1811.
Yes, sir.
It's similar to Army CID, where they have active duty members, CID agents, and they also have civilian agents that do exactly the same job and have also overseas assignments and all of that.
Yes, sir.
Did you lateral transfer your 1811 from the Naval Investigative Services to the DEA, or did you do a complete different application?
I had to resubmit another application, but it was a lateral transfer. Of course, my grade changed a bit, but I came on with a year and a half experience with the Naval Investigative Service.
And the transition between utilizing UCMJ to utilizing the federal codes, was that a big change for you?
No, because I had experience while I was with NIS working with the civilian world. I worked with DEA, I worked with San Diego Police Street Team, I did a lot of undercover work, and I was in civilian courts as often as I was in military courts.
That's great. Some of your assignments were San Diego, Jalisco, California, Guadalajara, as a resident agent in charge, as supervisor. You were in Mexico City as a liaison. Describe your functions in Mexico as an agent and diplomat, because a lot of people have a confusion that when agents from federal agencies go overseas, that they have police powers, and more or less they are guests in those countries. You work with the locals, as more or less observing and helping them with intelligence, but your role is not to conduct the actual arrest and prosecutions in those countries.
Yes, sir. That's exactly right. As a diplomatic agent assigned in any country outside the United States, our chief function is to liaison with our host counterparts and exchange intelligence. As a DEA agent, of course, my priority and my focus is to work with the counterparts, but to develop information that I can then pass on to my own counterparts in domestic offices and with our headquarters, where they can conduct domestic investigations at that end. Ideally, to bring the two investigative efforts together and work a bilateral investigation.
Do you encounter corruption, and how do you work around it? I mean, working in a lot of places outside of the United States, the lack of pay, sometimes the lure of so many billions of dollars that these cartels move, makes a lot of people jump to the other side and work both sides.
Yes, sir.
How do you navigate that?
I was fortunate in my early years with the DEA out of the academy to have been assigned to a Mexican or to a U.S. border office shared with Mexico. In this case, the city was Calexico. It sat across from the Baja California capital city of Mexicali. And during that era in the mid 80s, we had no representation on the Mexican side of the border in U.S. consulates. Most of our offices were in interior Mexico. So that allowed us, especially the Spanish speakers, to cross the border and work with our Mexican federal counterparts. And we did that quite often.
Is that era before or after the Kiki Camarena incident in Mexico?
Kiki Camarena was abducted in February of 1985. Of course, we know he was tortured and murdered and killed. I came on the job late 85, went to the academy immediately in December of 85. I came out in April of 86 and was assigned to the Calexico office. Um, so it happened afterward. And as far as the corruption question you asked, I learned as a rookie agent uh, what Mexico was like. And I realized from growing up on the southwest border that Mexican was a different world. I went there as a child. I witnessed a little corruption while I was with my father, driving around as a kid, about 8 years old. I saw an example of mordida when my father was stopped by a motorcycle cop, asked for his ID. My father pulled out his wallet. Out of his wallet, he had a $10 bill, maybe it was a 20, sticking out along with his ID. The officer took the ID, the money, handed back the ID, and said goodbye. There were no words spoken between my father and I. He just looked at me, smiled, and we drove on. That was my first experience in Mexico with corruption. Then, as an agent, I learned early on from looking at all the events that occurred surrounding, leading up to Camarena's abduction, and the investigation that ensued afterward. It was still fresh in everybody's mind, and I realized that Mexico was a different world.
Yeah, Latin America as a whole is a different animal altogether, and you know, I always look at corruption. That corruption starts at the top and it trickles down. Um, and I give it a good example. If you took money as a cop, you don't start taking money because you become the chief of the department. It just gets bigger and better. And once a cop takes that step, or an official of any government takes that first step, they no longer represent the people. They no longer uphold the Constitution that they were sworn in to uphold. And I always, as a former internal affairs investigator, I always had that in back of my mind. You know, doesn't matter how much nepotism there is in institutions, you could only hide the sun so much if you put your thumb out. The light will come through one way or another, and the truth will come out. And
Very
when you're
well.
dealing with bad guys,
Yeah.
if you are a cop, and I tell all the cops this, you're a cop or an agent or a government official, the first person they're gonna turn is you.
Very true.
Because you are that ace in the pocket if
Oh
they
yeah.
get caught.
Yeah.
So I throw it out there. So if you're ever thinking about taking money or doing any business with any cartel or anything, uh, I think you should hear my advice.
Yeah, no, well said. Let me go back to your question about how I navigated it. I learned early on because I had really good mentors that taught me the difference between Mexico and the United States. For example, their definition of corruption is a lot different than ours. First of all, they have a different system. Their system, where what we would define as corruption, they saw as like an oil that kept the machine going. For example, mordida means nothing more than a bite, and it means that everybody gets a bite, and it's like a system of favors. And so the policeman, when he stopped my dad, he did my dad a favor of not writing him a ticket and forcing him to appear in court. So he took his money, let my dad go, and that was just a very soft, example of corruption. Now, on a bigger level, I noticed early on that Mexican police, whether local, state, federal, they were poorly equipped, poorly resourced, and many times they had to buy their own equipment, and in many cases they seized it. They seized their own cars, they seized their own weapons, and the government would not support their role or function, so they had to go out and do it on their own. It didn't take me long to figure out that at the higher level, and I mean the political elite, they look at the police as nothing more than security guards for the wealthy.
And it's very true. And also the the amount of different little agencies and the amount of different agencies that you encounter when you're working in Latin America. Some places have national police, like Colombia, Venezuela, and Ecuador. They have national police, but some places have, like in the United States, little departments in each little town that get their funding, and the pay to those police officers is very little. Like right now in Venezuela, I think a police officer is making $3 a month. So, and when they go in to buy food, is dollarized, even though the money is the bolivar is non-existent in the streets. So they surviving from people sending dollars from overseas to their families. So everything is dollarized. With $3, you can't
Amazing,
buy anything.
amazing. Yeah,
A doctor with specialties making $200 a month.
yeah. No, it's incredible to see how when you cross the border from Mexico on down to Argentina, that it's a different world, different system, and law enforcement and many other professional trades are viewed differently and undervalued in comparison to what we have in this country.
And to give it the benefit of the doubt, you have a lot of brave men and women in those countries that really take their job seriously and to heart and uncorruptible. You have some that are really, really um, c- committed to their profession, and you have worked with a lot of them in your career, and many agents that have worked overseas have worked with these counterparts, and we need them because without them we can't operate.
Very true. And the one thing that I noticed was that many counterparts with whom I worked very closely with, they entered with an idealistic approach to what they wanted to do. They saw themselves as doing something noble, but it didn't take long for them to realize that they were caught in a system that didn't appreciate that and didn't reward it. And consequently, they were either confronted with either getting on board with the systemic corruption or getting out alive or navigating their entire career through a system like that. And that is what my second book is going to be about.
Tell me about your new release book, Junior, A Son of the Gulf Cartel. What motivated you to write this story?
Well, of all the cases that I had worked from the time I came on the job, um, this is a case that impacted me the most. It affected me both personally and professionally. It was the largest case in terms of scope of targeting, and I encountered both traffickers and sources, cooperating sources, um, that were both challenging and rewarding all at the same time.
Junior had a motivation that was very unique. He was truly a good family man when it came to his children, his wife. He had lost a child, and then a second child, one of his little girls, had a congenital heart disease that needed an operation, a hole in the heart that needed to be operated, and the only way he could do that was in the United States. At the same time, he was navigating where all narcotic traffickers know that if you get into that profession, sooner or later you're going to lose a shipment that is going to put you in a hole and nobody's going to come to save you. He travels to Panama to meet with the with
A transporter.
one of the transporters, and then he gets kidnapped by the Colombians that he owed the money to. And that gave him the epiphany or the awakening. During that time, something happened that you were assigned to Mexico and you happened to run into each other by faith or who knows what. And that's what established that relationship.
Yes, sir. So it all started while I was in Guadalajara in 2002. We initiated an operation which targeted a group of siblings that were part of the Sinaloa Federation at that time. The Gulf Cartel to this day is significant for global threat. At that time, 2002, we had identified these siblings, but had no way of infiltrating them to develop a case. So we sought out informants because, as you well know from your vast experience, informants are our collective bread and butter. So we sought out an informant and found an informant, and he was in Miami. He was in Colombia. We managed to bring him into Mexico after he was vetted and assessed. And we tried to infiltrate that organization of siblings. And he was in Mexico for a number of months, but he wasn't doing very much, which had us concerned about whose team he was really on. Was he playing for both of us, one of us, and stringing the other along, or what was the deal? Shortly into that, I was transferred from Guadalajara to Houston, Texas. And that was in the summer of 2005. Shortly after getting there, I got a tip that this other individual, who was a Mexican national, was an associate of the Colombian. We were told that this individual in Houston was a significant broker of major cocaine transactions. So I developed enough to determine that he was tied to the siblings. And I knew enough about the siblings and their organization to use it as I went out to try to track him down and recruit him as an informant. And so that's what happened. We tracked him down, determined that in fact he was there with his wife and infant child. It was a legitimate family crisis. And of course, that was our opportunity to approach him. We did so privately, away from his wife. And I sat down with him and convinced him to cooperate with us.
What was the first moment you realized Junior's story needed to be told in a full-length book rather than a case report and after-action memo?
Probably after the first year into the operation, where Junior had really revealed to me his intentions, his true intentions about wanting to turn his life around. I realized it was something I had never really experienced. Of course, you know from your experience and mine with DEA, that working with informants, generally speaking, you don't get close to them. You do develop a friendship, but you don't really feel their soul. And I have to say, I felt this guy's soul, and I saw him and was rooting for him to change his life around. He was seeking redemption, and some of the things that happened in this case uh, disturbed me and had lasted quite a while. So I knew, other than just it being a crazy, gigantic sized global operation, it was his story that I needed to tell as well. So I realized that at some point in time, I would tell the story from both perspectives: DEA from mine and my cohorts, and his perspective. And of course, the traffickers, because I had a chance to interact with them as well.
Because in these major operations, it's such a big team effort, and the men and women of the DEA know how to do it well. I mean, they put it in these countries, and the people that stay in Conos uh, are such a big support, uh, and they really help each other to make the cases pan out, because it costs millions and millions of dollars to run an operation overseas. It's not what people think, that is from one day to another, and that all of a sudden you're presenting the case to a grand jury. It doesn't work that way. It's
Right.
a lot of moving pieces, and you
Absolutely.
have intelligent analysts, you have support, you have management, you have the people in Washington, you have the people rooting for you in Washington, and the people that are not rooting for you, and you got to play that. You like walking in a very thin line in every operation.
Absolutely.
Some
Absolutely.
managements want to save money. They don't think it's necessary to go all out. They want to cut the operation shorter. They don't want to go all the way to the top. We'll get them the next time. And then you have the other side saying, no, let's go all the way to the top. And then the way game, because they tell you the shipment is going to be this Wednesday, but they don't tell you what year, and you're waiting and waiting, and you're moving all these resources. So is that the way it works?
You've been there. Clearly, you've been there.
Yeah. So um,
Yeah. I
it's,
call
it's,
it the human factor.
it's the human factor.
It is the human factor.
Uh, was there a specific incident in the Band of Brothers operation that convinced you that this book was not just a case file?
Absolutely. First of all, let me just say for the record here, it was not the Mike Chavarria show.
No, that's why I point out that this a team effort, a
Yes,
big team effort.
a big team effort. I mean, when this case really started, it was Guadalajara and Miami. Then, shortly into the case, within a year, it became Guadalajara, Miami, and Houston. And then it grew to those offices, and then Atlanta and New York and Chicago and in Europe, Colombia, Central America, Panama became a very important key pivotal location to bring it all together. But it became a global investigation, the biggest case I'd ever worked. And after it was all said and done, several years later, a lot of people went to jail.
And because of the type of investigations, cases could start in 2005, and it's 2015, and you still have from that case things that are still moving, that were not able to be put together at that time, but that come back years after in a continuation
Yes,
because of all of the tentacles these cartels have. You know,
absolutely.
you have the transporters, you have the money launderers, you have the support personnel, depending whether it's by containers, whether it's by airplanes, whether it's by fast boats or semi-submersibles, or whether it's these new techniques where the chemists now could transform cocaine into plastic, rubber, and then reverse it, losing about 10% of the product and convert it back into powder. They just caught a chemist in in Peru that did over 75 flights, and what he was doing, they were making turntables, electronic turntables, and the new DJ equipment, and every part that was made out of plastic was actually cocaine hidden inside that plastic. And they were
Amazing.
sending, they were sending tons of coke through this method.
Ingenuity and no budget constraints.
Right. So, as I see the operations going on in Latin America, and I see that the president and the government is doing such a great work in the Caribbean and the Pacific. But as somebody that had, at 63, I have seen a lot of things over the years. Organizations adapt and they change their ways. So while we are tackling the water, we're not looking at the air, we're not looking at the containers, and we're not looking at the old way of transporting the drugs, which is the human factor. And millions of people fly through airports, and with these new techniques, a lot of drugs will sip into the country. And we are concentrated there, but we live in other countries untouched or unharmed, and they are filling in that gap, or the rerouting of narcotics through other countries that are not on the radar, and they will ship the drugs into the United States.
Absolutely.
So it's a big fight. It's a done task.
Yeah, it's never ending, and we're always seem to be 2 steps behind.
Right. At what point did you decide I'm going to tell it in a way Junior will have wanted me to tell the story?
I think it was when I spent so much time, in fact, a number of years thinking about it, struggling about how to tell it. When I first wrote the story, it was twice the thickness of this book, and of course the publishers and literary agent and fellow authors, mentoring authors, told me you're going to have to focus on the word count, and I struggled with going from DEA concise factual reporting to a page turning story that would be of interest to not only fellow cops, fellow law enforcement, but the layman as well, and tell it in such a way that the layman would not only understand the drug trafficking part of it, but would feel the emotional side of the human dynamic. And it took me a while to figure out and to struggle about how to tell the story, because I was frustrated as I relived the operation. There were a lot of things that occurred that I felt were, unnecessarily adversarial. Good guy tug of war. And then I was told by a mentor, he said, Mike, just write the story as Junior would like it to be told. And for me, that was an epiphany. And so that's what I did. And hopefully I managed to do that.
You have a brother that kept advising you, and kept a diary of DEA adventures, and that shaped the book, right?
Yes, sir. I'm glad you mentioned that. My brother, 4 years older, was also a law enforcement officer. He was a municipal policeman in an incorporated city just outside of San Diego called National City, very high crime rate area. And he used to tell me, because of my DEA experiences going into other countries, he said, you need to keep a diary and make a note. Keep track of the things you do, the sights, the smells, what things looked like, what they felt like, interactions, your training. And he says, people are going to want to read about it someday. And so I channeled him.
You mentioned occasional rage while writing. What specifically triggered the anger as you revise your operation?
It's a part of the book that unfortunately exposes some of the negative aspects of bureaucracy, of our bureaucracy in our country. I know we have multiple offices and multiple jurisdictions, cities. Again, I'll go back to the human factor. In this particular story, we encountered agents from a different office, in this case, Miami, who started the operation with the Guadalajara office. And so they were jointly controlling the Miami informant, who was the Colombian. This Colombian, shortly into the operation, we determined, at least myself and my partner, Jimmy, in Guadalajara, Jimmy Martinez, we determined that the informant was not working really hard for us. And so we pushed him. He gave us the tip to go and approach the Mexican broker counterpart of his, an associate. But he thought we were just going to follow him, take photographs, see who he met with, and call it quits. And that he thought he would earn some credit for that. The agents in Miami did not know about me approaching this fella, Junior, in the hospital. They did not know about our having recruited him until after the fact. And what I assumed was that once we revealed his recruitment, we would be throwing, a party collectively, knowing that now he had two informants into the same organization, and we could hold them accountable, track their progress, and hold them, like I said, hold them accountable. And it was for credibility purposes to have two informants, unwitting, focused on the same targets. We could have done that collectively, jointly, smoothly, productively, but that's not what happened. The human factor kicked in, and concerns about who's going to control which informant, both informants, the case, the operation. It became a bone of contention that turned kind of ugly. And I want to also take this opportunity and say, had nothing to do with the fact that these agents were meant to do this. I think it had a lot to do with inexperience, maybe a little naivety, and bureaucratic pressure from leadership in their office. And it just made it extremely difficult for us to develop this investigation and operation. We still did, and it wasn't easy, but that is a long story to describe the frustration I felt during and after. And I held off a good number of years before I put this story in a position where it was released.
When you think of Junior, what is the very first image that comes to mind from your time with him?
That's a great question. And I have an image, and it has to do with after we recruited him. It was during our debriefing of him, where after a couple days of all-day debriefings, where our analysts and agents questioned him about all of the cocaine that he facilitated from Colombia through Central America into Mexico, into the United States. We counted up 47 tons, metric tons. And so when I walked into the room and I saw him laying on the sofa, it was a suite, hotel suite, he had a cold washcloth over his head because he he revealed it revealed that he actually had remorse for what he had done because he was forced to confront his own reality, and I saw his remorse, and I felt this remorse, and I saw that he wanted to turn his life around. Um, that's what comes to mind. Also, his boyish, innocent smile, where you couldn't help but like the guy.
No, it's and you know, and I tell a lot of people this, that in different circumstances, whether it's organized, traditional organized crime, whether it's Colombian organized crime, Mexican, or whatever, you have men and women in those organizations that in other circumstances are well educated, talented, smart, articulate, and they will like they, you know, in a room of people, you don't have a tattoo in your forehead that says I'm a drug dealer or I'm a hitman, but you get to interact with them in an undercover capacity. Yeah, I really like this person, or that woman is beautiful, and it happens that you know you get too close to your target. I mean, it's just
For
human nature, you
yeah,
know.
sure,
You
sure,
have
sure,
to
sure.
you have to balance that in an undercover capacity.
That it's great talking to you because you have the experience that you have. You understand uh, the complexities of working these types of things and with these types of people. And I'd like to point out something that I learned early on as well, or at least it took me a while to figure out. You have good people that do bad things. It doesn't mean they're bad people. You have bad people that do good things. It doesn't mean they're good people. So, I learned everything is gray, and you have to judge every person on their merits and give somebody a chance to express, their desire to seek redemption. And it's not good guy, bad guy like you see on TV, where you slam your fist on the table and demand an, you know, I want you to admit you're guilty. It doesn't work that way.
You know, I'm gonna tell you a little story that happened to me in the first precinct I was assigned. I went into the commander's office for a debriefing, you know, welcoming type of thing. And I told him my story, you know, when I worked undercover in customs, this and that. He wrote an intelligence report that I gathered later on in my career, where he says Officer Acosta is too well versed in Colombian organized crime. I think he should be investigated. They opened up an investigation because I opened up to him and I said, listen, I have informants, I could make cases, you know, I naive thinking, well, I'm in the police department, I'm in uniform, maybe I cannot do the cases because I'm not an investigator, but maybe my information could be passed on to the detectives that could work that information, and I'll make the introductions, right? Well, it derailed my career. So you have people that judge you by where you are born. Imagine, police officer born in the city of Medellin, myself. I came when I was a little boy. It's not like I grew up in Colombia, right? It's not my fault that I was born there, but it gives you a stamp because of ignorance that people will judge you. Oh, if you're Italian, you were born in Sicily, then you're in the mob. But first, get to know the person, see their story, find out their background before you put it on paper and you start damaging careers. And it has happened to me in airports. Later on, it says U.S. citizen, place of birth, Colombia. You got to go into the secondary,
Secondary.
and then when they find out, but this is what. Oh, we sorry. Did it make a real difference? I'm not carrying anything. You
Hmm.
could take me to the secondary, to the third, to the fourth. You could swipe my hands. I, I'm not in that. But it's judgmental. I don't know if it has happened to you in your career. Or,
Of course, um, it's part of the police culture to do that, to profile. In that era that you're talking about, you remember the old saying, not every Colombian is a trafficker, but every trafficker is a Colombian.
a Colombian, right? And then,
And you got caught. You
I
got
got
caught in the
caught in
middle of
that.
that absurd,
Right,
scenario.
right. So what could be an asset to an organization that is led by people with a little bit of common sense could also be the deterrent of that person from having a good work environment. Um,
Yeah.
I had several experiences, and I think that being an idealist in law enforcement is not a good thing. Especially when I went into the military. I was 17. The date of my birthday, I went and signed up for the Marine Corps. And my first experience was that I passed everything, and a week after I was supposed to leave to Paris Island, the recruiter calls my mother and tells her, listen, the Marine Corps is not accepting non-citizens, green card holders. So we're going to lateral transfer his paperwork to the Army. I didn't join the Army. I wanted to go to the Marine Corps. So they say, well, you cannot get out of your contract. And basically I was pushing to the Army.
Wow.
So, those are experiences. Plus, in the 6 years in the Army, I kept losing my citizenship paperwork. They used to throw it in the garbage. I had to get out of the Army to become a citizen.
Unbelievable.
I wanted to be a career military guy, but
Hmm.
so all of these experiences build a wall of distrust for organizations. And even with all of that, I continue to work in very hostile environment. I mean, a very hostile environment.
Well, I, I'd like to say that some things have changed and some things have, but we still have situations like that just make you, you know, ask yourself why. Why is this happening?
Yeah, it's tough. Um, you describe his eyes as a doorway to his soul during the first meeting in the hospital. What did you see there that told you he could be flipped?
Very good question, and I hope I articulated that, described it well in the book. But when I was on my way to the hospital to locate him, encounter him, sit down with him, um, I knew pretty much what I was going to tell him, but I didn't know how he was going to react. So when I first encountered him, he was an adversary. He was a drug trafficker. I didn't know how significant he was. I didn't know if he was deadly dangerous, if he had been responsible for killing other people. I didn't know what I was going to encounter. But when I did encounter and I saw him from the first moment, he looked like an average guy. You would walk right past him on the street, medium height, medium weight, had a European look to him, had a very friendly, handsome face, good looking kid. Uh, I wasn't a kid, he was in his 30s, but he looked pleasant enough. He wasn't dressed wearing Gucci shoes or drenched in gold. He didn't have that narco
Aura.
look, obvious narco look to him. So I sat down with him, and shortly into our conversation, I could see when he felt that I was a law enforcement, a federal law enforcement officer, getting ready in his mind to arrest him, I could see it in his eyes. I could see he wasn't worried about himself going to jail. He was worried about having to be taken away from his family at such a critical time in the family life. He was going through a legitimate crisis, and I could see the guilt. I had been sitting by that time in my career, hundreds of people at all, from all levels of the spectrum of being, terrible guys who didn't give a shit if you were going to arrest them or not. But this guy did care. And like I said, it wasn't self-preservation. He was worried about his family. And that is when I realized that he would come over and work with us. And that's a long-winded answer, but I hope that answered it.
To what extent did Junior's upbringing as the son of a Gulf Cartel capo predetermine his path, in your view?
Well, I mean, I learned after recruiting him, I spent a good amount of time with him and learned about how he grew up. And I realized that he didn't know any other life. His father was a Gulf Cartel capo. And by the time Junior came to an age where he was going to decide what he was going to do with his life, he was already predetermined that he was going to follow in his father's footsteps. It wasn't until he met the acquaintance of a Colombian who was a significant broker who had come up through the Medellin cartel. And when I say significant, I'm saying he had direct access to, the lieutenants and capos working with Pablo Escobar.
Right.
And, Junior rose through the ranks within the global drug trade, specifically cocaine trade, and became a cocaine trafficking rock star as a broker, not as a head of an organization. And I think there lies not only the difference in the type of character I was dealing with, but his significance in with regard to his ability to meet kingpins face to face. Because the role of a broker enables you to interact with both the sources of supply, in this case Colombians, the transporters who facilitate the transportation of the cocaine from Colombia into Mexico through Central America, and then the transporters who get it through Mexico and into the United States, and then from the United States to the ultimate destination distribution centers, in this case New York, making money all along as in the form of commissions. So this guy was significant.
Right. If you had to describe Junior in 3 words that his enemies will agree with, and 3 words his family will agree with, what will they be?
Wow. That is a very interesting question that I never would expect. But let me think about that. First of all, I would say he was loyal. Number 2, trustworthy. Number 3, responsible. And I'm talking about trafficker's eyes, family's eyes. Those are 3 things that I would characterize him as, where they would agree. Now, if I were to talk about 3 words that I think of with this book, the story, I would think of loyalty, betrayal, and redemption. And I would also say irony. The story is full of irony.
Family, faith, and ethics is a part that really caught my eye during the book. The characters, Sarah, the children, and the moral lines in the book. How did watching Junior and Sarah in the hospital waiting room affected your view of him as a target, a source, and a human being?
Okay, first of all, I never actually laid eyes on Sarah, on his wife.
You never saw her.
I never saw her. I managed to coordinate my meeting by way of making contact with the head of security, Lieutenant, retired HPD guy. And he worked it out to get Junior away from his wife into a room where I could make contact with him. I was with two other agents. But I knew what was going on with him in terms of his crisis because the lieutenant had told me so. So I was conflicted, but I had to have a poker face and I had to do my job. Again, I didn't know what he was all about. All I knew that he was a trafficker, a significant trafficker, and I had to get him off of that trafficking playing field. And that was my job as a DEA agent. Did it hurt knowing that it was, at that time, he's dealing with a life saving scenario for his infant daughter? Absolutely.
Yeah, because people don't understand that most of us in law enforcement, and I don't care if you were in the street for 2 months or you were in the street for 30 years, we all carry some type of PTSD. We all carry it because people come to us in the worst moments. They don't come to police officers or agents to invite us to their weddings or birthdays. We are there in the worst moments, and we see the suffering not only of the targets but also of the agents and police officers that have to get into a shooting or that they themselves get shot or that they lose their lives. So we carry all of these memories with us, and sooner or later it will develop into high blood pressure, anger, drinking, divorces, many divorces in law enforcement. I mean, I'm on my third marriage, so I'm an expert at that. So,
Number two.
yeah, because you're never home. You're always doing something for your career, or or fighting the demons that led you to wherever position you went to. What is the one scene with Junior that you will still replay in your head today?
Besides the one where he's laying on the sofa with a bottle of Tylenol next to him and moaning with the washcloth over his head.
Right.
Probably the moment where he came back from Mexico after a face-to-face meeting with the head of both the siblings associated with the organization we were targeting from the very beginning of the case. He managed to get a direct meeting with them, recorded their conversations, and he came back feeling like he was 007, and he was looking forward to submitting an application for the DEA because he realized he was the best undercover agent we had.
What did Junior teach you about the inner workings of the Gulf Cartel that you did not know after decades in DEA?
Good question. That all cartel leaders function differently, run their own organizations. They may collaborate, but they're friends one day and adversaries the next. And there's a lot of gray area. I didn't know about the function of a broker. Many of DEA colleagues didn't know about brokers. Many of us assumed, as I did, that it was an organizational responsibility to take care of all of that within the organization. Brokering, transporting all the way from Colombia all the way up to the United States. And I learned that there were like franchise services that would work with various organizations across the board. Gulf Cartel, Sinaloa Cartel, they would share 10, 20 tons of coke coming in a maritime container. It would arrive in Mexico after monies were paid, go to a warehouse, and then split up, divided, and sent to different locations, resold so many times to mid-level traffickers, some of which would go to the United States, some of which would go to Europe. I realized that shortly into this case, because of Junior and his successful infiltration and penetration, we ended up targeting multiple organizations and dismantled a couple of them completely from head to toe.
The general public and a lot of law enforcement agents or police officers, they don't know that the term cartel is an American invention. There was no such a thing as the Medellin cartel. It was an organization of guys that got together, and Pablo Escobar decided to be the lead head. But I know from my workings down there that he was not the biggest guy. He just happened to be the head. You have narcotic trafficking cannot function without the blessing and permission of people within the governments. It cannot. And I proved a point during the pandemic. During the pandemic, when everything was closed, nothing came over that border. What changed after the pandemic subsided? If we were able to close borders, not firing around, not doing anything, just by order, decree, and nothing came across any border, nothing came in through airports, we shut everything down, right? Why can we apply that same type of techniques when it comes to controlling? We're never going to stop it, because as long as there's people willing to put their health and their bodies in danger by putting something into their bodies that they don't even know how it was manufactured, whether it's going to be the first and last seed that they take.
Yeah.
But there is this urge for us to alter or change our pain or the way we think. Because in your case, 47 tons he had moved up to that time. Let's count the millions of people in the United States. Where are all these drugs going? Somebody, plus they cutting it. So 47, if you cut it by 3, is not 47 tons, is 3 times that, right?
Oh yeah.
And sometimes they step on it so many times that I guess the loot is so much that at the end you're just buying junk. You're not actually buying. So you buy a kilo of cocaine in the lab for $500, right?
Yeah, right.
And then at that time it gets to the United States, and at that time was around 30, 35, sometimes 40. During the 80s,
The peak
was very expensive. And if you went to Europe, 75, 85 to 100,000. If you went down to Australia, even more expensive.
Sure.
And if you went to countries that supposedly were so tight, like Russia and things like that, it will be much more expensive. So articulating that, right? We could control the amount of drugs coming in. It could be done, but it has to be done not only uh, with the enforcement, but also with the consumption. If we don't attack the consumption, if we look at only as a disease, if we we become an enabling government to tell our citizens that it's okay for you to smoke marijuana because it's legal medically, and now we're making it legal for consumption without having the study that the marijuana of the 1960s and 70s, the THC level was 5 to 7%. Now you're looking at numbers today of 35 to 40% THC level. The cortex of the brain doesn't develop until the age of 25. If we allow all our youngsters to consume non-stop marijuana, who's going to lead this country in the future? There's no scientific. Having a brother that works in the emergency room in a hospital and talking to different doctors, the amount of young children going into hospitals right now from their parents smoking on top of them marijuana, and they going in with mental disorders, distressors, because it's affecting them. Can you imagine if you smoking non-stop marijuana?
I know. I've said this many times, and I continue to say it. The drug trade is the most lucrative industry in the world, bar none. You have two things that are opposing one another, that if one doesn't get resolved, and if they don't both get resolved, we're going to continue this so-called drug war forever, in which we're on that road, on that path. You have an insatiable appetite in the United States and throughout the world for drugs. Number one. Number two, you have an insatiable appetite for the money that is generated from the cultivation, production, transportation, and distribution of drugs. Those two things are working against one another. If we want to make some headway, we need to follow suit exactly along the path you just laid out. We need to place more resources on the demand end of things and affect that insatiable appetite for drugs.
Because I was standing in the middle of the city of New York, in Times Square. It was like an open market to drugs. And the uniform cops walk around, or they put their foot on top of the wall, holding the building so it doesn't fall down. Or they're on their phone playing around. Now everybody has a phone. I don't know how you patrol when you're on your phone, but I don't want to criticize how they do their job. But what I'm saying is, if I could see it, why can't they see it? You legalize something, right? There are restaurants you cannot smoke cigarettes. Then there's rules. There is rules. But when they legalize marijuana, there's no rules. They drive in big trucks, and they open the window, and the smoke and the smell gets into your car. If your vent is working from the outside into your car, and you get a contact high right away, driving in the highways. You go in the trains, they smoking. You go in the buses, they smoking. You sit at the beach. I live a block away from the beach. I can't sit down at the beach with my family because I get a high. I hate that smell.
Yeah.
I don't even drink alcohol. By choice. I tell people it's my religion. I'm Catholic, but that's the biggest joke. But I tell people, I don't do none of that because it's my religion. I do it by choice.
Yeah.
But I just think that we don't have the rules now in these developed cities. We have places where you get syringes, you get a clean place so you could shoot the drugs, and they test it for you. Oh, you bought heroin? Let me swipe it. Oh, it contains fentanyl, but I give it back to you. I don't recommend you doing it, but if you die, we'll revive you.
Crazy.
How much craziness do we have to have? Or how much lack of common sense do people have to have for things to continue to spiral to a point of no return? Legalization does not work. In Amsterdam, drugs were legalized, a lot of drugs, hash, marijuana. You went into the bars and they gave you a menu for what drugs you wanted to use and you could buy it. And many soldiers went to Amsterdam and they came back and then they tested positive on the urine analysis and got, thrown out of the military.
Yeah.
But how much of this do we allow to continue? If the DEA is the leading agency in narcotics and the DEA had marijuana in a schedule and it was there, scientifically put there for a purpose. Now we change the schedule because we want the states to make money. The states became drug dealers. That's how I view it.
Yeah.
Revenue, money, tax.
Yeah.
And they given the licenses for the marijuana dispensaries to former dealers. Do you think if I did 20 years dealing marijuana and you gave me a license, do you think I'm only going to deal marijuana in my store? Think about it.
Yeah.
I'm going to have Percocets, I'm going to have cocaine, I'm going to have everything under the table, and I'm going to have my runners, and now you're going to have to apply for a warrant to come into my establishment. You're going to have to do an entire investigation to see what my dealings are. I don't think people change their ways that much.
I agree. It's people are who they are, and change. It takes a significant event in one's life to actually make a change. Like in Junior's case, that was a moment for him to change things around.
Right, but people could change, but that's
You're right.
not that many people that change their ways.
No.
You can't.
No.
Especially if there is an addiction part within them, and if they believe that drugs is the solution to everything. I hear young kids tell me, "Oh, marijuana has given me a better way to study." No, it doesn't. Because when I'm talking to you and I ask you a question, you don't give me an answer right away. You start going, what do you ask me? Can you ask me again? I know that you're not thinking straight because you're high.
Well, part of that you're seeing is another kind of addiction. It's an addiction to the phone.
Yeah, and it's a terrible addiction.
It is.
Let me go to a part over here. You're right that informants like Junior have no cavalry standing by. What did a typical high-risk meeting look like from your vantage point versus his?
Could you repeat that, please?
Cavalry.
Oh.
Cavalry.
Cavalry. Rescue.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, unlike us as undercover law enforcement officers, agents, we always do our undercover work knowing that we have a team standing by.
Ghosting you? You have the whole team ghosting you?
Well, we're wired. We know that if something goes to crap, if the crap hits the fan, so to speak, we have a rescue team standing by. Generally speaking, their exceptions are some of these long-term undercover things that are done, like with organized crime, the mob, the FBI, ATF, with outlaw bikers, etc. But generally speaking, in my experience, undercover scenarios are short-lived, and you're you're either buying a sample or you're negotiating and you're out. In an informant's case, they're usually all alone. We send them out there to do our tasking, to make contact with the targets, embed themselves, um, get up close and encourage them to incriminate themselves and reveal their operations. They're all on their own. There's no cavalry standing by, and a lot of times they're doing stuff that's extremely dangerous, to say the least. That's what I meant by that. There's no cavalry.
Yeah, and over the years, a lot of informants in Colombia and Latin America have lost their lives because,
Yeah.
uh, they, especially the Cali cartel, they used to call it the Cali KGB. They had their own intelligence apparatus. A lot of these cartels are now functioning like small governments, where they have intelligence people, they have special operations people, they have people that are experts in explosives, in drone technology. You have people working in the telephone companies to get them records, DMV,
Yeah.
and all of this.
Sure.
And when you arrive in a country, they already know you're there.
Of course.
They have people that check your passport. Oh, we have a new diplomat coming to the embassy, and they send them a picture. This is what Chavarria looks like. So if you run into him, be careful because he might be working for one of those agencies, and it happens. But
Yes.
people don't know that most of the cases made by federal agencies in the United States are due to informants, especially
right.
in drugs or weapons, money laundering. You need people in the inside that are willing, whether for money, whether for a cooperating letter, in a lower sentence.
Mhm.
They put their life at risk.
Yes, they do.
So it's
I'm
it's
glad. I'm
something.
glad you brought that out.
Yeah. How often do you override operational opportunities because the risk to Junior was simply too high? I have a motto, and I don't know if you is your motto. We could always make that case tomorrow, but we have to go home tonight.
Absolutely, and that was the case with Junior. We relied heavily on his intuition. He was very convincing, charming. We knew that he had, like a cat with 9 lives, had lost loads and was still in operation because traffickers trusted him that he would make it up on the next load or the next 2 loads. Um, so we trusted his gut. And if he said, look, I'm pretty confident about meeting with these guys. I know I owe this other guy money, but I'm no good. I can't repay my debts if I'm dead.
Right. And I think that it's possible that because of who his father was, or the amount of time he spent brokering all of these major loads, that he had that leeway. But there are also cases where you lose one load and you don't come up with the money, you're dead. Your family's dead. I mean, uh, that was the case with Pablo. Pablo will I had a case of a young guy that disappeared in New York. I was already a private investigator at this time, and his mother came out in Don Francisco, um, crying that she had not seen her son. He used to work in a bank in Medellin, and he came to Queens, and within a month he disappeared. And what happened was the people that brought him to the United States with a visa told him that he had to guard an apartment where drugs were being kept. But those same people stole the money, stole the drugs and the money from the cartel and blame him, the new guy.
Yeah, sure.
So they told him to go to a billiard to meet with them, to leave the apartment and come and meet me. And they put him in a van and they killed him, and he was found in 2 bags, plastic bags,
Yeah.
in pieces, right?
Mhm.
And for the longest, the mother was trying to look for him, and I helped her, per diem, without charging her anything, you know. And what happened was, after looking at all of the people that were found dead, I came up with his photograph, and I compared it to his cedula from Colombia. I had blown up his cedula photograph and the fingerprints of the registrar's office. And we were able to, he was already buried in Paros Field. It's an island where they bury people that are non-identified. And they cremated the remains, and she took it back to Colombia. About
Terrible.
a year ago, I went looking for the lady, and she had already passed away. But the daughter, the only surviving daughter, allowed me to go into the house, and they had my photograph in the same shrine where they have, the picture of the mother, the father that had died, and the brother that died, that I found in the United States. And she allowed me to take photographs, and she left a letter for me,
Wow.
a thank letter if I ever went to Colombia looking for her, because she offered me her house. She said, you're part of my family. So nobody helped her, that I was able to reunite them, and it's very satisfying when
Of
you
course.
do that type of stuff.
Absolutely. Wow.
So what happens is, they stole the drugs. The organization finds out about it, and those people are no longer around.
Happened all the time.
That lure of easy money is crazy.
Live
Did
by
you
the sword,
ever-
die by
Yeah.
the sword.
Yeah. Did you ever deceive Junior or held back critical information for his own good? And if so, do you still stand by those decisions?
No, I never held back information. Of course, I was just, a bit deceptive when I first met him, and I was assessing him, didn't know what he was about, and that was the very first meeting that we had. But from there on, I held him accountable and trusted him, but verified that his cooperation was, was that he was forthcoming and forthright with his information, and we controlled him as a source. But I never deceived him from that very first moment on. No, I never held anything back. I was concerned about keeping him safe.
You describe the Houston group transforming into a real band of brothers. What defined that culture on a daily level?
Now, it's a good question. So when we first started out in 2002, when I first started out in 2002, targeting that group of siblings, their names were Rodriguez Olivera, and there were two brothers, but a bigger family of siblings. But those are the two main targets. I was interacting regularly with Special Operations Division, which is a telecommunications kind of a control center that helped to deconflict cases that had common ties. Okay, they also had a lot to do with coming up with, names for operations. And because this was a family of siblings, tongue in cheek, we thought of the Band of Brothers. So we named the operation Band of Brothers. It started out to be representing the targets that we were going after. By the end of the case, and thanks to Junior, and we included him in this Band of Brothers, we became the real Band of Brothers, because we became one group, one collective mind, one mission, one objective, and it felt like a family at that point. And that was a year into his cooperation. He really, in my opinion, redeemed himself, and we included him as a member of our organization. In fact, he frequently joked about us calling him 007. And he would continually ask, "Hey, after this is all done, I want to be a DEA agent." So he was all in.
That's great. Mike, I really like to thank you, and I want to invite you back for a second part of this, because I didn't get to ask all the questions, and I think we owe it to the public to continue at this in another segment, if it's possible.
William, it's been a privilege and an honor talking to you. I know of your background, your experience. Many of your questions were very insightful and really, brought some memories back. Some good, some bad. But overall, I agree with you. It's a subject matter that needs to be discussed, aired, shared with the community at large, and some lessons to learn, from not only good things, but some of the bad things that we do in this business of ours. I really appreciate the opportunity.
We just heard a rare inside look at the realities of cartel warfare, informants, and international narcotic investigations from someone who spent his career living it, not just studying it. I want to thank Mike Chavarria for sharing his experience and for walking us through the story behind Junior, a son of the Gulf Cartel. I encourage you to pick up a copy of the book and go even deeper into this world. To everyone listening to the Equalizer podcast, thank you for your time and supporting this in-depth conversation with the men and women who have stood on the front lines. I'd like to thank the audience, and a special thanks goes to my production team. Without their working efforts, this program will not be possible. This concludes this episode of Equalizer. If you like this episode, please give it a like and share it with your family and friends. And follow me through the links provided on the screen. Till next time, I'm your host, William Acosta. Stay safe and God bless you.